todos. A gente está esperando que alguns
Good morning.
entrem na sala
We are waiting for some participants to join.
participarem desse
Thank you
webinar,
for being here today for this
novas
webinar,
oportunidades.
Trends in the Global Market for Green Bonds and Opportunities, part of the World Investor Week. The views expressed here are those of the speaker and represent the view of the institution he or she represents. They do not represent the view of any of the organizers of the World Investor Week. Thank you very much for being here. Now I offer the floor to Mr. Morgan Doyle, representative of the IDB in Brazil.
Morgan está em mudo.
Morgan, you're still muted.
Bom dia a todos.
Good
É um prazer
morning.
estar aqui com
It's a great pleasure
vocês,
to be here with you.
participantes desse
Good
evento,
morning
parte
to the participants.
2020 no
We
Brasil.
are in the World Investor
Cumprimentar esse
Week,
movimento
and on behalf of
e
the
agradecer a
IDB,
todos
I
que
would
estão
like to
online.
thank you
Quero
all.
também agradecer a
I'd
Henrique
also like
Machado,
to thank
diretor da
Enrique
CVM,
Machado,
Juca
Director of
Andrade,
CVM,
vice-presidente da
Juca Andrade,
clientes da B3, que nos dão
VP for Clients
oportunidade de
at
participar
B3.
dessa sessão
It's
que é
an honor to have you here in this session that is split in two. First, we have a short ceremony to announce an agreement, a partnership that we will sign with CVM, and we believe this is very important for the Brazilian capital markets. Juca from B3 is our partner in these activities, and he has been a witness of the efforts we have carried out in order to work in this sector in Brazil and making this area more attractive. And then at 11, we will start the webinar, Trends in the Global Market for Green Bonds and Opportunities. This is a very important area for our economic recovery, and we should work with agility, with inclusivity, and more than a trend, this market is a reality. In Brazil, in August this year, there were 50 emissions, which corresponded to more than $170 billion. I'm sorry, $8 billion. This is a large volume, but it's small compared to other markets, such as the United States, which um, can reach 170 billion, China 100 billion, and we think there's still a lot of space and opportunities for the debentures markets, fintech, and financial literacy, as well as other bonds that could be categorized as sustainable, social, or green. This is not just a label. This is about finding synergy with operations that will bring revenue, that will yield benefits, improving infrastructure in the country, improving resilience um, vis-a-vis climate change, achieving more equality, gender equality. So we're talking about the best of the worlds. These are mechanisms that assist economic growth, including and considering the climate. These challenges are not opposites, they can complement each other. And the promotion of this market is one of the objectives of this agreement we are signing with CVM. We are trying to create the conditions to carry out work that has been happening in practice for at least 3 years at the innovation lab that have the IDB and the CVM as partners. This is very important for the maturity of the financial system in Brazil. And I am talking about the fintech support. Brazil has been carrying out many things, and we believe that the country is able to go even higher so that credit and savings can be a reality for more and more Brazilians. But I won't take more of your time. We are very happy to announce this formal partnership.
pouco frustrado por
But
não poder celebrar
I
esse
am
dia
a
de
little bit frustrated
reunião.
because I can't be there with you,
Infelizmente, a
Enrique
distância
and
é
Juca.
muito difícil de
Unfortunately, the
conjugar,
distance is
mas eu
still
queria
one of the
concluir
challenges we have because of
vencer
this
e
pandemic.
outros obstáculos.
But I am sure we
E
will
nós
overcome these
podemos saber
obstacles
que
and
sairemos dessa etapa com nossas
we
capacidades de
will
cooperação
overcome this
fortalecidas.
phase and we will be
Passo a
stronger.
palavra a
And
Henrique
now
Machado,
I offer the
diretor da
floor
CVM.
to Enrique
Obrigado.
Machado, Chair of CVM.
Muito obrigado, Morgan.
Thank you, Enrique. Thank you,
Bom dia a
Morgan.
todos e a
Good
todas que
morning.
acompanham este evento. No
Good
dia de
morning to all of
abertura da
you
World
here
Investor Week
today.
2020 no
This
Brasil,
is the opening day for the
obrigado
World Investor
especiais
Week
a
in
Morgan
Brazil.
e ao Juca
Thank you,
que me
Morgan and
permitem
Juca.
compartilhar
I
este
have the
momento.
honor
De
to
maneira
share
justa,
this moment
pois
with them.
o
I am
distanciamento ainda
also
é necessário,
sorry we can't be
mas de qualquer
together,
forma
but
é de
we
fato
still
com
need to
enorme
respect the
satisfação
social
participar desta
distancing.
semana de
But
eventos
I am,
para o
anyways,
investimento,
very
em
happy to be in
especial
this
para
World
divulgar
Investor Week.
a parceria entre a CVM
And
e o
I'd
IB
like to highlight
no
this
desenvolvimento do
partnership
mercado de
between
capitais.
the IDB
Já
and
temos
CVM for
disponíveis
the capital markets.
esforços para
We have
encontrar
been working
soluções
together for a
inovadoras
while so that we can
de
find
alavancagem de recursos
innovative
privados para
solutions in
projetos
order
com
to leverage
responsabilidade social
private resources and
e contribuir
environmental and social
para o
projects,
cumprimento das
contributing
metas
to
brasileiras associadas aos
the
Objetivos de Desenvolvimento Sustentável
SDGs
e aos
goals in
compromissos para o
Brazil,
enfrentamento
as
dos
well
riscos
as
climáticos
to
climáticos. Nesta
face
nossa
the
pauta,
risk of climate
tal como
change.
agregamos, além da
We have been
CVM,
working for this
IB,
agenda, and I mean both
diversos
CVM and
parceiros
IDB,
envolvidos como a B3,
and there are several stakeholders such as B3 and
soluções
others.
como seguros e
And we have
garantias,
been working
títulos
with
verdes,
securities and guarantees, green
avaliação de impacto
bonds, SDG
socioambiental,
bonds, evaluation of the social
fundos
and environmental
de
impact,
solidariedade.
rotating
Falamos
funds,
sobre fintechs,
solidarity funds. We
como
talked about
Morgan
fintechs,
bem
as Morgan
mencionou,
mentioned,
se gestão de riscos socioambientais é de
the
fato
risk management,
tema
environmental risk management.
que
So we
merece
have
a
a
atenção
full
e ser
menu
tratado
that needs our
a parceria
attention
com o
and
IB
that
foi
have been
estabelecido.
addressed with the partnership with the
Com
IDB.
efeito, a emergência dos riscos
And the
socioambientais
emergence of the
deve ser
social
considerada
and
pelo
climate risk
supervisor de
should be
capitais,
considered by the
na
supervisor,
definição e na
which is
supervisão
CVM in
dos
this case,
regimes regulatórios
when
previstos,
supervising
dado o caráter fundante
regulating
dos
policies
valores que
due to
perpassam os
the
objetivos de
fundamental
desenvolvimento
value
sustentável,
of these principles
o que vai muito
for
além das
the objectives,
operacionais
the Sustainable
internacionais
Development
e da constatação
goals.
noturna
And this
dos impactos econômicos
goes
e
beyond
sociais
the
destas ações.
international actions and also has to do with the
A par da
impact.
variedade de iniciativas sobre as quais temos nos debruçado,
We have been working with
gosto de
several
ressaltar
initiatives,
a
and
importância de
I would like
fomentar
to
o
highlight the
mercado
importance
brasileiro de títulos
of
verdes,
promoting a
mediante
Brazilian market
emissões
for
brasileiras
green
como o
bonds,
Banco Negócio,
debentures,
BCA, certificados de
bonds,
recebíveis do agronegócio, nosso CRA, todos podem
certificates
ser estruturados
for
como títulos
agribusiness.
verdes.
Everything can be
Sua emissão,
structured as green bonds.
além de fomentar o
Their
desenvolvimento
issuance
sustentável do
can
agronegócio, ainda
promote
permite
sustainable
a
development
diversos
of
integrantes das cadeias
agribusiness and can
produtivas
allow
tenham
several
acesso a
participants
recursos,
in the supply chain to have
independentemente
access
do seu
to
tamanho.
resources,
Outras vertentes
notwithstanding their
também desenvolvem
size,
esforços internacionais e
and
conjuntos
working with
diretamente com seus
international
parceiros
efforts
também. A CVM
and
deve
working with our
aprimorar a
partners.
divulgação de
CVM
informações das
can
companhias por
improve
meio do formulário
information from the companies with
tanto do
the
Impact Report,
reference form and can
IRR,
increase
formulário de referência, de
um,
questões ASG,
the
temas
reporting
sensíveis e
related
correlacionados
to
à atividade
sensitive
econômica,
topics and related to the
promove a
economic
integração dos
activities of
dados
companies.
ASG
This
com a
promotes the
disclosure
integration of
e
data
contribui
that
para a
are
harmonização e
disclosed and can
consistência do
contribute to the
reporting
consistency
do
of
próprio
reporting,
investimento.
benefiting the
Como
investor.
também não tenho a pretensão de me alugar para além do
I
tempo que me é
also do
reservado,
not want to take too much
mas
time,
eu gostaria de, ao fim, além de
but I would like
demonstrar a
to
satisfação da CVM com a formalização dessa
express my
parceria,
satisfaction
também quero
on
saudar
behalf of
os
CVM
parceiros
with the partnership, and I'd
IB e
like to
CVM
greet
que têm
our
aliado
partners,
esforços
IDB and
voluntários para
CVM, who have
aprimorar
been
ainda mais
working
o campo
together
nosso
in order
mercado,
to
visando
constantly
a
improve our
construção
market,
de um sistema
thinking
mais
of the
inclusivo,
construction
justo
of
e
a more
sustentável.
inclusive, sustainable,
A todos e a
and
todas vocês,
fair
meu
system.
agradecimento. O
I thank you all on behalf of CVM.
Passo agora a palavra
And
ao
now
Juca
I offer the floor
Andrade,
to Juca,
vice-presidente
Juca
de produtos da
Andrade,
B3. Juca,
VP
com você aqui.
for Clients and Products at B3.
Obrigado, Morgan. Bom
Thank you,
dia a
Enrique.
todos.
Thank you, Morgan. Good morning.
Agradeço aqui, em nome da B3, o convite que a
Thank you on
CVM
behalf
nos
of
envia
B3, the invitation from CVM and the IDB so that we can participate in this event that is part of the World Investor Weeks about the capital markets in Brazil. We believe that joining efforts, we can see the evolution of these markets. And for B3, it's an honor to be able to witness this cooperation, CVM and IDB. I'm also honored to be able to contribute to the discussions on financial sustainability in the webinar about trends in the global markets and opportunities, which will follow. We have seen this agenda in the whole world, and in Brazil, it wouldn't be different. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, talked about the need for uh, the management of material resources that could have an impact in the long term. The pandemic brought this topic to the forefront. And so the number of products that have these principles has increased. The investor profile has also changed, and more investors, young investors, have been looking for investments with certain proposals and that have a positive impact in society. Several institutions have already participated in these ESG principles. We believe that this adds value to the companies and to long-term investors. And bringing this topic to this week is very symbolic because it shows how the investors are connected and how they want to learn about the ESGs. This agenda joins education, market infrastructure. Education is essential to attract new investors and expand knowledge in the Brazilian market. But we also have the role to promote good ESG practices, offering products and services that might support our clients in this evolution. We are working with our clients with practices and exchanging market experiences. We are promoting reforms and changes in order to attract more investors. Our sustainability index, for example, will include an assessment of materiality. And we are trying to make green bonds more visible in Brazil, and we have just launched a new ESG index. We also would like to develop new business front lines, including different areas. And today, we will be able to talk about our strategies during this meeting. But if I could sum it up, I would say that we have a great opportunity to bring knowledge and awareness for everybody, explaining the impact on everybody's lives. ESGs will create a framework for finances in the entire work. So I thank you for the invitation and congratulations to CVM and IDB
Muito
for this
obrigado,
meeting.
Juca,
Thank you very much, Juca.
Henrique, pelas palavras e pela
And thank
disposição
you, Enrique, as
para a
well,
gente
for your
vocês
words
participassem
and
aqui do nosso
for
evento e a sua
being available to
entrega
cooperate.
realmente
We
significativa.
value
Estamos muito
your
preocupados com isso.
participation and we are very
Então,
excited about
eu
this
gostaria de
partnership.
convidar a todos
I'd
que estão
like to
aqui
thank you
participam aqui
all
conosco nesse
here
mesmo link,
today
nos acompanhar agora no evento que começa
to
agora,
follow us
que o evento é de fato
in this event that starts
títulos e
now at
títulos.
11, which is
Nosso
trends
painel
in the global
realmente
market for
muito
green bonds
destacado,
and opportunities. We have
com
an
experiências
excellent
internacionais.
panel that has international
Realmente uma série
experience.
de falas muito ricas
We
em
have
relação ao
several speakers that will bring
Então, vamos esperar
their
um
rich
pouquinho
experience to the topic. So let's wait for a
começar
minute.
o
It's
evento em tempo.
10 a.m. EST and 11 a.m. Brazil. But before we close, I'd like to recognize the importance of the partnership we have with CVM, and I'd like to congratulate them for the leadership, congratulate Enrique Machado, the chair of CVM. And I'd like to recognize the extraordinary mission that B3 has in order to help the advancement and also as a leader in this agenda, which is so relevant for Brazil. Congratulations to you too, and thank you very much. And with this, I will now start our event.
Bem-vindos todos de novo, quando nos acompanha essa
Welcome again, all of us who are following us at this first session of our WIW, and welcome on behalf of IGB to those who are now connecting to our webinar, Green Bond Global Market Trends and Opportunities.
And thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to point out that translation is available and may be accessed by clicking on the button down at the bottom of the screen that says interpretation. It has a globe icon, and you can freely click between languages. There'll be interpretation for the entire event. Este evento conta com tradução simultânea em português e inglês.
This event has simultaneous interpreting English and Portuguese because we've had the joy to gather people from Brazil and from abroad, people who are extremely relevant not only to IDB but also to the whole of the region. I'd like to thank the panel members who are joining us at this event, which is broken into three parts. This will be a 1 hour session, but we hope to have time to open for questions at the end. For those who would like to ask questions, please click on the Q&A tab, or in Portuguese, perguntas e respostas. Before we go on to the first presentation, I'd like to highlight the reason why we've chosen thematic bonds as the first topic of our week. Of course, we know that this is an object of increasing interest, and I think it will help us understand structural issues in Brazil and for the whole of the region, such as the case for infrastructure. But we also know that there are issues such as the taxonomies or names or requirements or the ways that one has to work with these bonds. This is why we've been holding events such as this, because this is how we can help interested institutions interested to issue such bonds here in Brazil. We have the ABC Bank, which was the very first bank to issue social bonds, R$500 million issued for organizations that work in the health area, for example. We've also helped the BMG conclude their sustainable emissions. So among our panels today, our goal is to convey knowledge to you, but we also want to share our enthusiasm about this topic, both for the country and society. And we hope to go on cooperating in order to drive such strategic instruments that will help solve this huge crisis in our region. I'd like to thank you once again. I'd like to give the floor to Maria Neto, our IDB expert, who's going to make a presentation about the potential of thematic bonds to support sustainable investments. Thank you very much, Morgan. Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure for me to be here today to touch on this topic. My presentation on the slides is in English. I'm going to speak in Portuguese in order to make it a little easier, the fact that we're talking or speaking in two languages. As it was said, this sustainability topic is critical, and it is a great opportunity, especially when we take into account the COVID crisis for our region, the Latin American region. It was one of the most impacted regions in the world, not only the number of deaths and infection cases, but also from the economic growth perspective, the impact on small and medium-sized companies, etc. And all of this brings about the need for us to begin to speak about the necessary economic recovery and the way how this is connected to other international recoveries. Before the crisis, we had already been looking at important trends in the financial sector to look into these possibilities. On the one hand, we have been looking at the market regulations and good practices at the international level. We have been witnessing the central banks and securities commissions, as well as public-private schemes, and also in Brazil. And with great pleasure, CVM and IGB have been driving this discussion about the regulation market within the lab context. Another interesting trend, and this panel has this benefit of bringing about examples from the national and international points of views. In other words, they're going to speak about their perspective on transparency and regulations. On the other hand, we have also been feeling a pressure on the part of the investors themselves because they start to create their own principles and good practices vis-a-vis the fiduciary duties and the code of conduct for financial management, and also everything that has to do with thematic bonds. And this is why I'm touching on these topics. In truth, this is part of this global trends on capital markets for the Latin American region. We've seen a lot of activity, both from the regulations point of view, because in fact, Brazil even distinguishes itself in trying to promote sustainability and good practices in the market, both from the CVM perspective, the central bank. We've also seen important initiatives on the part of the private sector, and we have to take into account both of these trends, which the ones that are up-down and the ones that are bottom-up. Another important trend, and this is why it's so important to take this into consideration in the market, we see that investors are giving more and more importance to investments with environmental management. This is a huge growth. This past year, we've seen an accumulation of assets over 40 billion. And we see these investments, particularly in countries or continents such as Europe, US, Japan, Canada. And of course, this also means a pressure for markets in Brazil to be able to internalize and also to be able to capitalize. This same trend will occur in those exchange markets, and we will be looking into a few examples of this, but it also brings about the issue both for issuers and investors to be able to show a little better what they have been doing, not only with regard to the impacts of what they've been issuing, but also governance and risk management. So this is what I'd like to highlight here. And this is going to be a little bit the topic of our discussion today, precisely the COVID-19 crisis. Well, the market as a whole, of course, had a very significant fall. It was very important to see that during this fall, investments went on occurring, but most of them valued social environmental risk management more, whereas governance with regard to social and environmental impacts, this is also important to investors. It's not a new trend. It is a trend that has been growing, but it's interesting to see that the COVID-19 crisis drives the attention to this governance much more. So these bonds are an opportunity for us to promote and take advantage of opportunities. So we know the market has been developing for over 10 years or 5 or 8 years, depending when where we see its starting point. So the green bonds are well known in the market. So we know these markets in Brazil. When we speak about these bonds, we are speaking about green bonds, but in fact, as Morgan has said, IDB has also been supporting and valuing social bonds. Green bonds or social bonds are, in fact, bonds that have a positive environmental impact or a positive social impact. And even more interesting, for example, more recently, we have seen the Mexican government bond 2 weeks ago. We see a trend towards speaking about sustainable bonds or SDGs bonds. In other words, bonds with social impacts, green impacts, or bonds connected to any one of those goals of the UN goals for 2030. So this bond market, as I've said, depending on where we see its starting point, it is already about 10 years. Well, proportionally, we see the social bonds and the sustainable bonds growing quite a lot. And in the COVID-19 crisis, in spite of the market fall, we have seen here a renewed opportunity for such bonds, precisely due to the need of investors to demonstrate that their investors or toward are going towards sustainable efforts. So we've seen an interesting opportunity for these in the market. And it was indeed interesting for IDB. We've supported the Ecuador example. They've issued the first sovereign social bond in the world. And this was used for a social program in response to the COVID crisis. So the link to this response to the COVID-19 crisis, this has created an opportunity to make this connection between the response activities and sustainability. But furthermore, I'd also like to highlight that many of them have not yet been aligned to thematic bonds, which is really a shame. But I believe that we shall have the opportunity, especially when we speak the exchange panel, to show not only the responsibility, but also to make a clearer correlation between investments and their impacts. And maybe those 51% of bonds that have not been aligned as social or green bonds, actually they might be losing or missing an opportunity to show what they've been doing. This is important not only to the private sector, but also to the public sector when we speak about sovereign bonds. So the populations get to know what is really happening with these bonds. In Brazil, this opportunity, just as Morgan has said, is an important opportunity. IDB has been placing its bets there, and it's important to see that the green market in Brazil is still at its beginning. it is growing. We've had a fall in 2018 due to elections in Brazil, but we believe that this market will go on growing exponentially. In fact, today, the market is very much concentrated on power because of the debentures, but also due to a few companies, and we shall see this in other panels. For example, paper and pulp industry, which has an important percentage in Brazil. But when we speak about green bonds, the potential is huge in Brazil. If we think about infrastructure sectors such as transportation or water, these have not been used, these bonds, in a significant fashion. And this week, we shall have, as a response from the lab, one of the panels that will discuss driving the use of this bond for water and transport. So there's great potential for the infrastructure sector. And of course, so social and sustainable bonds have great potential because they are proportionately small in Brazil, as Morgan has said. In our private window, we've just approved the very first program, a social bond. However, these social and sustainable bonds still account for a small share of the market. It has a great potential for expansion. The IDB group is strongly committed to this market. We have begun working in this market 5 or 6 years ago when this market was almost non-existent in Latin America. There was some in Mexico and Costa Rica with international issuances. However, it has been growing tremendously, and we have been helping this market, especially in the beginning, trying to work with different types of issuers, private or public, in order to structure their issuances. But as important as trying to structure these issuances, offering financial mechanisms such as guarantees for anchor investments, or for example, the covered bonds, we've also been carrying out important work. And once again, I'm very pleased to highlight the next panel because we've been trying to promote more transparency in knowing the market, both for local issuers and international issuers. What we see is that indeed all of these trends that we see at the global level, be it for regulation, be it for investors, good practices, be it to uh, disclose data about what companies have been doing, all of these needs for the market to understand better and navigate what are the opportunities and how to present what has been done from the sustainability point of view. In the beginning of last year, IGB gave its support to an analysis on what had been going on for green bonds in the Latin American region, but the results were a bit worrying. Only half of the issuers were reporting on what they were doing. And so in order to drive more transparency and also to raise the level of awareness on the part of investors about this, we've launched this platform, the Green Bond Transparency Platform, and this platform will be launched in November. However, we're lucky because we have been already working in a pilot with different issuers in Brazil and some of the issuers here. So to us, the platform is not only for issuers to report what they've been doing, but also from the need of uh, reporting and giving information in a standardized fashion, also to report on what has been going on, and also to help exchanges in the international market. In other words, how can we promote the creation of these assets and the monetizing of assets such as the green bond? IDB has started out with green bonds, and we hope that if the Green Bond Transparency Platform works well, and we are almost sure it will, we shall have also the possibility in future, if the market progresses as we believe it will, we hope to expand this platform to sustainable and social bonds as well. Today, we are launching the Financial Innovation Lab, which is a very simple leaflet, but we believe it is important for the market to understand what are the trends and opportunities in Brazil. Again, we believe there are very important potentials in sectors such as transportation and water and sanitation that really can have a much greater response and impact. We believe that there are many things that have been done in Brazil with social impacts that can be even more valued if we can promote the social and sustainable bonds as well. I'm going to end here because we really want to hear the other panel members. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. It is true that in the COVID-19 context, the situation is very challenging. However, we have great opportunities. The market is resilient and may have positive impacts. Cannot ignore this positive wave. I'd like to ask your permission to change language. Those who prefer to go on in Portuguese, please click on the globe on the lower part of your screen.
Very pleased to invite some really critical actors, important actors from the international financial markets, to whom I'd like to also express our gratitude for joining us here today. I'm sure that there are many lessons and insights that you can offer to our Brazilian audience as to how to tackle the challenges of developing the thematic bond market that will be very pertinent and germane. It is, as Maria highlighted in the previous presentation, a fast evolving market here in Brazil. And that brings a lot of opportunity, but also requires quite a bit of knowledge in order to leverage that opportunity and to safeguard it, I would say. And that's exactly what we hope to explore with this panel, titled Understanding International Trends and the Potential of the Thematic Bonds Market. And we're very pleased to welcome to this panel three very distinguished people: Leticia Hammond from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange, Mr. Anthony Miller from the Sustainable Stock Market Exchange Network, and Ms. Anne Charlotte Eliason from NASDAQ. So thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. And so I'd like to jump right in, if I may, to take advantage of our time and ask the following question to all three of you. And that question is a simple question, but I think it's a really important one, which is, what is the main challenge that, from your perspective, is facing the development of this market? And why do you believe that it's worthy to overcome that challenge or those challenges? I'd kindly ask you to limit your answers to 4 minutes, as we have quite a bit of material to cover. So first, I'd ask Leticia Hammond from the Luxembourg Stock Exchange if she may offer her comments, her views. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Morgan, and thank you for inviting me to take part of this World Investor Week. I would just like to echo what Maria said on the fact that there is a huge increase in terms of green, social, and sustainability bonds that we see on the market. And specifically this year, 2020, because of the COVID crisis, we've seen a high number of social bonds that have been issued on the market. So that's very promising all in all. But according to CBI and Moody's, this proportion of number of bonds and money that is channeled through these bonds is still a very small portion of what we see in the number of global bonds worldwide. And that goes the same thing for ESG funds and the number of assets management. It still represents a small fraction of it. And I see some challenges in there as well. Maybe not one major one, but three that I can explain in those 4 minutes that you give me. The first one really is education. I've been in this field of sustainable finance for the last 12 years. And as much as I'd like to believe that everybody understands what is sustainable finance and what are green, social, and sustainability bonds, I have to come back to some reality. And we still have a lot to do in terms of raising awareness and giving trainings to all those financial market players that are looking for technical, operational, and regulatory training. So really, education is something that we need to invest on as well, as long as we want that market to develop. The second challenge that I see is the challenge of the data. Because I've seen many reports, and also the Luxembourg Green Exchange does it as well. We published a number of green bonds that are issued, or social bonds, and the money in there. But eventually what we want to track is also the impact of those bonds. We would like to say that the X number of green bonds had a potential of reduction of CO2 emissions per X amount of tons. And that's really what we're looking at, the impact of those bonds. And so there is data everywhere on that, more and more than it was in the past, but it's very unstructured. There's no methodology behind, or it's not the same methodologies that are used. So we lack standardization and structuration on this data specifically. The last challenge that I see is linked to transition finance. So you've mentioned thematic bonds, and for those ones specifically, we look at the proceeds that are channeled through these bonds. Now we see new instruments on the market that are general corporate purpose bonds. So we don't look at the proceeds, but we focus more on the issuers side of things. And that's, for example, the case of the sustainability linked bonds, where we wouldn't look at the proceeds, but we would look at the issuers. And that's a very welcome trend if we want to encourage issuers to transition. But that's also an area where we need more than anywhere else, transparency and credibility to avoid greenwashing. So all in all, there are challenges that needs to be overcome if we want to shift that still small market to a mainstream market.
Great, Letitia, thank you very much. I agree wholeheartedly. Well, let's hear what Anthony has to say from the Sustainable Stock Exchange Network. Anthony, please share your thoughts with us.
Thank you very much, Morgan. Let me start out with your second question about why these things are important and why we should overcome whatever challenges are in place. In 2015, countries around the world agreed on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is a very ambitious program that includes green finance and tackling climate change, and aligns and complements with the outcomes of the Paris Agreement to tackle climate change. And these are goals that the world has set for itself to accomplish in the next 10 years. And we set these goals even before we had a global pandemic. So now one challenge on top of another. Now, achieving these goals is going to require a tremendous amount of investment. A lot of these objectives require infrastructure investment. So whether that's tackling poverty in developing countries where new infrastructure is required, or it's transforming fossil fuel-based economies in now developed countries into more green energy economies and low carbon economies, that also requires tremendous amounts of infrastructure investment. So this is where we circle back to why are we here? Why do we talk about green bonds? Bonds are an excellent tool and a mechanism to raise capital for every country on the planet. And of course, many of these bonds are listed through stock exchanges. I think when it comes to green bonds, we're looking at about half of the green bond market globally is traded on exchanges, and exchanges have a tremendous role to play in that area. So that's a bit about the why this is so important. We absolutely have to finance this transition, particularly when we think about climate change. This is an existential threat for all of humanity. So you asked about challenges. I was very interested to hear the challenges that Letitia spoke of. I look forward to hearing from Anne Charlotte. We always look at these exchanges because they're really on the front lines of how you make these work. I think from our perspective, looking a little bit at the macro perspective, a few challenges that I would highlight. I'd highlight 3 challenges in particular. One is visibility, making the market more visible to investors. Now, on the one hand, almost every green bond that's issued is oversubscribed. So no one has any trouble selling these things. So it's not, and so many times people could think, well, you know, why is Anthony asking me to advertise something that is selling so well anyway? Yeah, I think the important thing is to raise the visibility of this entire market segment. And I think Letitia, she didn't speak about this, but you should ask her about it. It's a very good example of what Luxembourg has done with the Luxembourg Green Exchange, where they really brought tremendous visibility to the green bond market and really promoted that. And this is incredibly important to promote this visibility, not just to investors, but also to issuers so that they're aware of this. They're not alone. There's 34 stock exchanges in the world that have some sort of green bond segment. And it's something that we recommend to exchanges, that they create some sort of separate segment to promote visibility of green bonds. B3 has one, by the way. But of course, there are best practices around the world. I always think the Luxembourg Green Exchange is a great example that many exchanges should borrow ideas from. The second challenge I want to highlight is projects. You know, every time you raise a green bond, you're raising money to invest in a project. I spoke about infrastructure before. Globally speaking, the vast majority of green bonds are going into energy projects, but then there are other various infrastructure projects they're going into. So at the end of the day, you need an investable project before you can even have an issuer. I mean, you cannot raise money and then sit around and ask yourself, what do I do with it? And this is a key point. I remember speaking with the CEO of a stock exchange in a developing country, and I told them when the SSE started our work on green finance, I said, you know, our focus is helping to move money from point A to point B. And he looked at me and he said, our problem is we don't have point B. And that's a real challenge, you know, and this is not something stock exchanges can solve, but, you know, this is something where this multi-stakeholder community of the people who are on this call, stock exchanges working with issuers, work with investors, but also working with government regulators. When you're dealing with infrastructure projects, particularly in the energy sectors or a lot of the other sectors that green bonds are going into, some of these markets can be heavily regulated and the types of investments can be regulated. So governments should look at these sectors and think about how they can increase investment in these sectors. And sometimes that might mean some modifications to existing rules about investment. So creating point B is important. And I'm going to end here just by saying the last thing, and I think this is something you're going to talk about later in the session, is going beyond green. You know, when we talk about thematic bonds, the biggest segment by far is green. That's done very well. Social has always been the sort of smaller brother to green bonds. Right. What we've seen earlier, and we heard a bit of this presentation about COVID-19 themed bonds, that has been a huge injection into social and sustainability bonds. In the first half of this year, there were more COVID-19 bonds than all social and sustainability bonds last year. So that, I think it's woken people up to the possibilities of what you can do with the bond markets. And it will be very interesting to see how we take those lessons forward.
Great, thanks, Anthony. I agree entirely. I think it's high time, and there's a lot more visibility now, to tie back to your first point with regard to social bonds and sustainability bonds in general. So great, let's turn over to Anne Charlotte then from NASDAQ for 4 minutes, please, Anne Charlotte, if you may.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I must say that I fully agree with what Letitia and what Anthony already said. So let me just give some flavor on this. I can't really see, I think that we already identified the major obstacles, but given the numbers that Maria showed us, we have a huge increase of bonds. What we need to think about is that we don't want to increase the number of sustainable bonds. And when I use the word sustainable, I know it's a sloppy thing to say, but I include both green and social and the combination of the two. So just bear with me. I hope you can live with this sustainable comment. if we just increase the number of bonds, I don't think it might be the case that we will save the world or make it more sustainable in the end. So therefore, it's of really big importance that we increase the transparency of the market. As we're all aware, the market is very transparent from one point of view. All issuers are publishing huge reports in a PDF file, but it's full of unstructured data, and therefore it's really difficult to compare. And we've been talking a lot about transparency in this market, but I think the transparency has to come from increased comparability. So transparency as is not really enough. But by increasing the standardization and increasing, or the standardization of reporting, that is, I think we can come a bit further. This standardization has already started from in a way, because more and more issuers, when they issue a green bond, they are also identifying certain SDG targets or SDG goals, and some of them also SDG targets, in order to limit it further. However, they usually don't quantify it. They say it's like, that's the thing. What we also see quite often is that even though we have this beautiful report, we have use of proceeds being on the third area, there's nothing. So I think that given that we are really interested in increasing the sustainable bond market by only allowing for companies that are making a contribution to the long-term goal of creating a better environment, I think we really need to change this in a very early stage. And that is exactly what Maria put forward with the IDB initiative. I think that's a really good initiative. It's very, very interesting, even though it's only for green bonds right now, and they might have ideas to prolong that. However, it's very easy said. We started our sustainable bond segment already in 2015. And at the time, it was not a really big market for sustainable bonds. So the issuers that I was in dialogue at the time, they were not really sure what to report on. So I think it's our goal as exchanges. We should contribute by doing what we have done for ages, is that we should improve the market by lowering the hurdles. And by lowering the hurdles, we need to be in dialogue with both issuers and investors and see where are the big obstacles. And I represent NASDAQ. We have, we talk to very many European, particularly Nordic issuers, also quite a few in the US and also in other areas of the world, as we have a global coverage. But what everyone says is that they're not really sure what to report on. And when you're not really sure what to report on, then reporting becomes even more time consuming, because everyone says that Standard & Poor's comes in and say, we want this measure. And no one wants to say no to Standard & Poor's. And then it continues. So that makes the market less, it's creating unnecessary hurdles. And in Europe, we have a taxonomy on its way, but that's only for European coverage. And maybe that will spread in some way or the other, but I think that could be, I think that is what limiting the market. And I'm really afraid that we're just looking into a sustainable bond market that is just increasing the number of so-called sustainable bonds, and we don't really keep track of them. And I think that's my 4 minutes. I can go on forever, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I think it's really important that thought. Precisely how to ensure that in these early stages, well, not so early now, but still, let's say at the beginning of the curve, because we do believe that there's a huge potential going forward, that that there is concerted effort to not only to agree on standardized measures in terms of what should qualify, but also in terms of the reporting and the tracking and the whatnot. So I couldn't agree more. I think that was very well said. And I'd like to point out the great deal of complementarity between the three of you in terms of what you've put forward, raising awareness, raising visibility, ensuring consistency, and making sure that there's transparency in terms of the empirical results that generate, and that entails standardizing and bringing together and making sure that we have a single way, in addition to having a bunch of projects, which is where we actually spend a lot of our time in thinking about how to get projects that are bankable or financeable. So with that, let me follow on with the second question, which I think is perhaps even more relevant right now, which is, given those challenges and given the very unique roles that your respective organizations and institutions play in the development of this market, and I'd like to take the advantage to congratulate all three of you for what your institutions are doing. What have you been doing exactly, precisely, in terms of offering to help investors and issuers overcome those challenges that you laid out? And feel free to encourage us to do more, to do something different as well. So, Leticia, pass the word back to you.
Thank you, Morgan. So in terms of the initiatives that we've been doing at the Luxembourg Grain Exchange, I'd like to mention two actually that we've developed this year, launched this year. The first one is the launch of the Lgx Academy that was launched in May 2020. And that comes from the fact that we realized that we are at the core of the market between investors and issuers, and also lawyers and investment banks that are all willing to contribute to sustainable developments, but sometimes they lack the knowledge on the specific instruments, also on the regulations and the standards that exist on the market. So basically what we've decided to do is we provide certified trainings to those people, so financial professionals, for those who seek an in-depth understanding of the principles and the foundations of sustainable finance, but also the ones that want a more advanced training on the topic. We've developed several partnerships since May, and especially one with the IFC, so internationally recognized institutions, to extend our trainings to specific markets. And that's, for example, the case with Latin America. The fact that we also go digital because of the COVID crisis is also an opportunity in disguise, I guess, because we're digital, and so we can target more markets and try to raise awareness more globally. So that's one thing. The second initiative that took a lot of our time during this year is actually the launch of the Lgx Data Hub. And so we've launched a centralized database where all the information, all the data points that you can find on green, social, and sustainability bonds is put in that database. The idea behind that is that exactly what Anne-Catherine said, the information is disseminated in many documents, so various sources of information. It's incompatible formats. It's different levels of granularity in terms of indicators. So we really realized that we had all this information. We just needed to centralize it, structure it, and leverage on our experience as one of the leading listing venues for sustainable financial products. So really that database is extremely granular. So it gives information at the bond level, but also the project level. And that's what Anthony mentioned. There's information at project level and impact indicators that I mentioned earlier. That's also super interesting actually to see what kind of projects are invested by those bonds. So you can get this information as well. And the whole idea for that data hub is that asset owners and asset managers can use that database to screen the bonds for their investment purposes, but also for compliance and for reporting purposes. So that's basically where we are. We had a very busy week, and we will continue to adapt this academy and the data hub to the needs of the market in the coming years.
Great. Thank you so much. Super interesting and super opportune to bring, in fact, a centralized database that provides such granular information. I would encourage everyone here on this webinar to figure out and use it, because that's a unique and useful data source. So I'll turn the word over to you, Anthony, if you please answer the question.
Sure. we've been working with exchanges for a number of years on green finance generally, and that covers both equities and bonds. But of course, a big part of this market is the bond segment. We have been promoting the idea of clear green bond segments among exchanges and working with exchanges who are interested in adopting this practice, but have some questions about it. So we do provide some technical assistance to exchanges in that regard. We are also trying to facilitate more policy dialogue between exchanges and security market regulators and beyond, because a lot of these things are not questions for security market regulators. They're questions for regulators in other areas of the economy. And that relates back to what we were talking before about creating projects and opening up certain segments of the market for these types of investable projects. So that is certainly something that we're trying to further as this policy dialogue to grow the market, if you will, for the investable projects. And of course, working with exchanges, as I mentioned, they're promoting these activities with their investors through market education programs. We also track those around the world. Many exchanges are engaged in market education on ESG more broadly, but certainly in this space, it's of interest to us. Beyond that is, and what I mentioned earlier sort of ended on, is extending beyond green bonds. We have been working with some partners on other types of bond programs, thematic bonds. I mentioned earlier the huge wave of COVID-19 bonds. There have also been other interesting bonds in the space of gender equality that have been launched and listed on exchanges. So these are all still small compared to the green bond space. And of course, the green bond space is still only a fraction of the entire bond market. So what that really means is there's tremendous opportunity for growth here. And I'd like to just end by reiterating this issue about learning lessons from the recent experience people have had with the COVID-19 crisis, that once people have picked up these things, and we've seen this in Scandinavia as well. I think NASDAQ listed some COVID-19 bonds there. They were very quick off the mark on that. So, and Charlotte can probably talk more about that. But it's, there's lessons learned during this crisis. People have started to look at social bonds in a way they never looked at them before. And those lessons don't disappear when the crisis disappears. So if we're all lucky, this COVID-19 thing will end sometime in the hopefully not too distant future. Yes. But the world will go on. And when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, we have another 10 years to tackle these things. And we can take lessons learned and learn how to apply them to other areas of poverty alleviation, aiding SMEs development, gender equality, as I mentioned before. So there's a lot of ways that the bond markets can be used to apply to other types of sustainable development goals. And we take as our guiding compass here the lessons learned from green bond market, which has been very successful.
Great, thank you very much, Anthony. The recognition of our collective vulnerability and the needs to really leverage what we've gone through collectively as humanity over the last years really does offer an incredible window of opportunity that for the development of this market. So thanks so much for that reflection. And Charlotte, can you please give us a little bit of insight into what NASDAQ has been doing?
Yes, of course, I would be delighted to. What we have been looking into is, as I touched on before, I'm trying to decrease the hurdles and using the fact that we are the middleman in the universe. However, we are no experts. So we are not investors, we are no issuers, we are not banks, and we are no sustainability experts. So therefore, we started off some work and we talked to those different parties in the market. And in December last year, in 2019, we launched an initiative on data as well. So our idea is that we want the issuers to be responsible for the data that they are presenting. The issuers can, today, all the issuers are issuing bonds. They could have a second opinion, perhaps, and then they disclose that. They can do some manual reporting and then disclose that, usually on their homepage. And then you can retrieve some data, as Luxembourg is doing, which is really good. So you don't have to go through all this material. But what we are doing is that we are asking the issuers or helping the issuers to come up with KPIs that they could report on. So usually for issuers, they are identifying certain areas. Maybe they're doing green buildings or wastewater management or something like that. And that's something that is very well defined. You have ICMA categories on that. However, since we are almost all following the Green Bond principles, it's only principles, and then we have these categories, then we don't have the level underneath. And that's what Letitia also mentioned, that they are collecting all types of data that is being disclosed. What we do instead is that we say, if you have a green bond building, why don't you consider these KPIs? And then we present those KPIs for the specific initiatives that they have identified, together with all the documentations that they have today. And this is all voluntary and in dialogue. And the KPIs that we have suggested, they are really well used within the market. So when we set this up, we did it in collaboration with both Sustainalytics and Cicero and CBI and WIW. So they all helped out, and they're now in our advisory board. And we also talked to big investors with PIMCO, APG, and BlackRock, and so on. So they also said that these are the measures that we would like to see. And we are hoping that for an issuer that has been reporting before, or is a new issuer, that when they have identified that we are about to do a green building, the first year when they are supposed to do this reporting, then they can look at, okay, we've done a green building, which are the measures that we could present? And then they can do that. And if they want to add something over the year, they can do that as well. And we are helping to distribute that. So we disclose it again in our market data feeds. It's also available on our homepage that is open to all. What is also different in this is that this is a pure global initiative. NASDAQ, we have exchanges all over the place. We have lots of offices everywhere. And we thought that we should use our global coverage when we do this. So we are inviting all issuers of green and social and sustainable bonds to upload their information on our network. And it's free of charge because we know that the investors really welcome this information. And we're also in dialogue with them when they want to upload this information, because we're hoping that this will make the comparability better. And with an increased comparability, we will all of a sudden get a better transparency. So that's the general idea, but it's all voluntary and free of charge, and we just welcome everyone to do it.
Great, thanks so much, Angela. That's very, very interesting, and I think very, very germane. So what we see is the incredibly important role that exchanges play by being right in the middle, but also actively seeking to create mechanisms for data availability, data standardization, data dissemination, which is in the end what makes the market. It really makes the market work. And I think the three of you have really also put out a very clear and compelling call to action for why we need to redouble our efforts to promote this market. So I want to thank you all for that, and for the work that your respective institutions are doing in increasing visibility, increasing standardization. And for those of you who are joining us today, I would encourage you all to visit the respective websites and learn more and look into those databases and look into those standards. They really are incredibly pertinent to the questions and to the challenges and to the potential, given what Anthony laid out in particular with regard to the realization that There's a huge demand for this. There are a lot of investors who are very keen to buy this. All of these issues so far, or the vast majority, have been significantly oversubscribed, and we don't expect that to change. In fact, much to the contrary. So there's a huge potential here. Visit and collaborate with our partners who have joined us today. Thank you so much for being here. It was really a pleasure to have the three of you. So with that, I would move on to our next panel. I'm going to return to Portuguese, com licença de todos vocês. Nesse painel, vamos abordar.
In this panel, we will be discussing the thematic bonds in the national Brazilian market. So I would like to welcome and to invite Juca Andrade from B3, José Alexandre Vascos, CVM, our partner for years, and Odivan Carlos Cargni from Irani Papéis. Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a great pleasure to be in this panel with you. So I have a question for each one of you. And please, if you can limit your time to 4 minutes, that would be ideal so that we can listen to everybody. And then in the end, we can have a final round of considerations. I will begin with Juca. B3, please tell us how B3 supports issuers and investors in this evolving market. You have the floor. Thank you, Morgan. It's almost good afternoon, but it's still good morning here. I think we can still move forward a lot in this market. Here in B3, we have the role to develop good practices, whether it's environmental, social, or governance, and we offer products and services in their evolution in this area, their development. And this is what we're calling the mainstreaming in the company. We know this creates value in the long term for the companies and the investors, and it is an essential practice in the market. So how do we do this work? We have to walk the talk, as we say. We need to align our company to the best practices, and we really need to put this in practice. And we need to strengthen and protect products and offers of ESG products. In the listing sector, when it comes to the stock market, we have 69 indexes in our portfolio, and only 7 are in the ESG area, 4 related to governance and 3 related to sustainability. So we are now launching, we're in the process of launching the SAP for ESG. And here we have a great opportunity to strengthen the position in these indexes, and we can analyze them historically, compare them to the traditional indexes. In the OTC segment, that has to do with fixed income, we have since November 2018, the green bonds. The emissions are identified in our registration environment. And we also use our negotiation platform. We identify the product as a green bond. In September, last month, September 2020, we had 4 billion reais in green bonds issued. We had 13 issuance issuances and 12 different companies. This is the beginning. We think it's still small, but it's a good start. We have been participating in the Financial Innovation Lab, and we intend to promote sustainable finances in Brazil before the government, society, and we're working with some issuers such as CBI. Another front that we have in the OTC area is the C-Builder, the vital or certificate that we have with the Energy Ministry for the fossil fuel and renewable fuel sector. And they started being registered here with B3 in April this year so that the companies could reach their decarbonization goals. I'm talking a little bit about numbers. The C-Builds as of September was 9 million bonds. We have non-committed bonds with 4,000 bonds, and we have a number of others non-negotiated ones. We have 1 million of bonds between 30-35 reais, and now we have several different initiatives, and we have to walk the talk. As I said, we have to show our products, but we also have to be a space where these bonds can be promoted, where we can educate investors and promote this market. This is still an agenda for more sophisticated investors, but we are noticing a very quick change. 84% of millennials will mention ESGs as a focal point. This is a Morgan Stanley survey. Many don't have knowledge, but 73% are interested in ESGs among individuals, and more than a third of investors at the B3 that are part of the millennial generation are interested, and 25% are women. We have structured initiatives with several fronts. We have our education hub for individuals, so I also recommend visiting this hub. It's edu.b3.com.br. We have debates, forum, we have a partnership with the IDB, CVM, stock exchanges, webinars in this sector. We have participated in a working group with the Ministry of Economy and the World Bank so we can follow the discussions in the carbon market, promoting this agenda in Brazil. And we also want to assist access to these instruments. So we package these products. There aren't too many offers, but they are growing. And I'd like to mention that today, exactly today, we are starting the negotiation of a new ETF to be issued. And we're doing that with BTG.
Então, essas são as bastante iniciativas que a gente tem feito nesse setor aí.
Parabéns. Muito obrigado, Juca, por compartilhar. Eu acho que realmente vocês estão aí promovendo o desenvolvimento desse mercado. É um parceiro fundamental para que deslanche ainda mais rápido do que já está, né? Então, eu agora gostaria de passar a palavra para José Alexandre Vasco, da CVM. Vasco, qual o papel do regulador para apoiar o mercado de títulos verdes e temáticos? O que acha? Pode falar.
Muito obrigado. Boa tarde a todos. É uma satisfação estar nesse evento e cercado de parceiros aqui como o BID, especialmente o BID está anunciando hoje uma parceria, a B3, enfim. Eu estou muito satisfeito de estar aqui ajudando o primeiro dia da World Invest Week para tratar de um tema que é tão importante para o mercado de capitais e para o país. Posso falar que, do ponto de vista do sistema financeiro, o tema é extremamente importante, porque o sistema financeiro tem um papel reconhecido isso na transição para o desenvolvimento sustentável e tem um papel também no apoio ao enfrentamento de certos riscos sociais e ambientais. E acho que falar de riscos sociais faz muito sentido nesse momento em que ainda estamos atravessando os efeitos da pandemia e sairemos, como os países sairão todos mais pobres e mais desiguais após esse período. Então, há claramente um papel para o sistema financeiro ter, e especificamente no âmbito dos investimentos, para não falar de seguros e outros temas, no âmbito dos investimentos, os investimentos são fundamentais. Nós tínhamos em 2018 uma estimativa de pelo menos 30 trilhões de dólares investidos em ativos que tinham adicionalidades sociais ou ambientais, e, enfim, até em função disso, um grande número de companhias e também de investidores têm reportado ou prestado atenção a esses temas. Então, a transição, especialmente para um país como o Brasil, que é um mercado emergente em crescimento, ela oferece grandes oportunidades de crescimento. O papel aqui dos reguladores, especialmente no mercado de capitais, ele passa principalmente, sem prejuízo de outras ações, né, pela promoção da transparência, que é fundamental, o disclosure das informações periódicas, eventuais, dos emissores, enfim, dos participantes de mercado, mas também a transparência sobre os riscos, né, e sobre a gestão de riscos, né. Esse tema eu acho que ele é um pilar da proteção do investidor, especialmente contra greenwashing e outros temas que podem prejudicar a credibilidade desse mercado. É uma gestão de risco eficiente, que ela passa pela transparência, um funcionamento eficiente. Acho que um ponto que não pode deixar de ser mencionado, que é a alocação eficiente de capital. Para que isso aconteça, é fundamental a transparência. Ela facilita aqui a decisão do investidor, esse principal tutelado de um regulador de mercado de capitais, né? E aí tanto o investidor institucional, que tem os seus próprios requisitos e requerimentos para investir, quanto também investidor de varejo, que, como acho que o Juca bem apontou agora, está mudando o seu perfil, né? Temos aí novas gerações, essas gerações estão buscando, muitas vezes, um propósito nos seus investimentos, e é fundamental que o mercado tenha ativos que, enfim, atendam a esse anseio, que é uma mudança natural aí da própria sociedade cultural, de valores, enfim. Então, uma pesquisa recente da IOSCO apontou, e foi publicada esse ano, que 83% dos reguladores de mercado de capitais, aqueles que responderam à pesquisa, apoiam de alguma forma investimentos sustentáveis, usualmente pela atuação no disclosure. E 45% tem alguma ação contra greenwashing, dados os efeitos nefastos que o greenwashing pode ter para um mercado, especialmente um mercado que está se desenvolvendo e começando a criar um histórico, enfim, de performance nesse tipo de ativo. Então, é um desafio, ainda poucos reguladores têm normas específicas para greenwashing, e é um tema que vai ganhar importância. Então, 80% dos reguladores que responderam à pesquisa entendem que as CVMs têm um papel. Esse papel passa por transparência, esse papel passa pela proteção do investidor, greenwashing, e um achado importante, que eu acho que também está muito relacionado com a questão da transparência, um papel de promover ou estimular uma certa convergência das taxonomias ou das third-party frameworks, já que existem. Isso facilitará a compreensão, esse é um movimento natural, e, portanto, a Task Force da IOSCO vai fazer um trabalho sobre o tema. Então, acho que, de uma forma geral, esse aí é o cenário. No caso específico da CVM, acho que já foi falado aqui do Lab de Inovação Financeira, nós atuamos nessas frentes, nas frentes regulatórias. O diretor Henrique Machado já mencionou aqui a norma a 480 dos emissores de valores imobiliários, que vai ser reformulada. Então, teremos uma atuação na regulação, pelo lado do fomento também na educação do investidor, como essa semana é uma prova, e um papel de fomento também ao trazer os participantes de mercado a discutir, se articular para promover esse desenvolvimento. Então, eu acho que esse aí é um papel ambicioso, mas extremamente necessário.
Obrigado, Vasco. Totalmente. Eu acho que você colocou perfeitamente a necessidade de ter essa clareza, essa transparência, essa proteção é realmente fundamental. E vocês têm esse papel intrinsecamente, né? Então acho ótimo que tenha a clareza com o qual você se expressou. Então agora gostaria de passar a palavra para nosso último convidado para esse painel, que é o Odivan Carlos Cagni, que pode falar sobre a atuação dele na algumas emissões temáticas nos quais já atuou. Eu acho que seria ótimo se você poderia contar-nos um pouco sobre você aprendeu nessa participação sua nas diferentes emissões temáticas. Então, pode falar, por favor, Odivan.
Também, obrigado pelo convite, Morgan. É um prazer, o Juca, o José Alexandre, para estar compartilhando esse painel, né? E também falando um pouquinho da nossa experiência aqui no dia a dia, na prática, né? No mundo real aqui da empresa, onde a gente tem uma responsabilidade grande, né? De fazer as coisas, de executar, né? Fazer as coisas acontecer. E nem sempre é tão simples, né? No dia a dia de uma empresa, a gente sabe quanta complexidade que existe, né? Envolve. E eu acho que esse é um desafio grande que todas as empresas têm, enfim. Falando um pouquinho aqui da Irani, né? Irani Papai Embalagem, uma empresa que está fazendo 80 anos, ano que vem, é uma empresa do setor de embalagens no Brasil, né? Ela está dentro do grande setor de papel e celulose, mas é um subsegmento onde aqui nós fazemos celulose, mas ela é totalmente integrada, usada em embalagens de papel e papel para embalagens. Nós não vendemos celulose no mercado internacional, como o Brasil é tipicamente conhecido, né? E nossa receita vem majoritariamente do mercado local, do mercado interno. Nós exportamos em torno de uns 20% do faturamento, mas 80% é aqui no mercado local. Nós já temos um histórico nessas questões, né? Eu acho que o setor é privilegiado, né? O setor de papel e celulose como um todo tem um aspecto muito importante de socioambiental, pela forma como ele lida, né, pelo uso da terra, pelo recurso natural renovável, que é a floresta plantada, que é a sua principal matéria-prima, né, pela geração de energia, que majoritariamente é limpa, né, pelo produto que é biodegradável, né, qualquer produto feito de papel ele é biodegradável, ele é reciclável, né? No nosso caso, a fibra de papel, a fibra da celulose que nós fazemos longa, ela é reutilizada até 7 vezes. Então, você usa um recurso, a terra, se usa o que ele é um recurso, vamos dizer assim, escasso, né? Até o uso da terra. Então, se usa com uma produtividade bastante elevada e ainda assim aquele produto da terra que é a floresta, a gente procura usar ele o máximo possível para dar a melhor utilidade econômica no ciclo de vida dele possível. Então, são 7 vezes que é possível reciclar uma fibra longa, né? Então, o Brasil é um país também reciclador, né? Não é tão conhecido pela sua reciclagem, porque se destaca mais pela produção de fibra virgem, de celulose, mas é um grande reciclador, né? O Brasil ele tá se desenvolvendo cada vez mais. E nós, na Irani, temos a produção de celulose, de fibra virgem, e também reciclamos, né? Na verdade, 2/3 da nossa matéria-prima é reciclagem de papel. Então, associando tudo isso, né, bastante vem do setor, da característica do setor, bastante daquilo que nós pregamos na empresa. Nós temos já relatório de sustentabilidade publicado há 14 anos pela metodologia GRI. Nós temos 2 projetos de MDL, né, registrados na ONU, né, um de 2005, outro de 2007, onde nós já vendemos crédito de carbono no mercado internacional, vendemos para Shell, Cargill e outras grandes empresas compensarem suas emissões lá fora, ainda quando o protocolo de Kyoto estava vigente e bem ativo, né? Agora está um pouco menos, esses créditos caíram, o valor do crédito caiu muito, o valor no mercado internacional, mas ainda assim nós mantemos os projetos, estamos gerando crédito de carbono, vendendo aqui localmente, até no Brasil já se desenvolveu esse mercado, temos algumas transações aqui dentro do Brasil. Nós também temos vários projetos sociais que são inerentes, né, da atividade, né, enfim, isso acaba formando uma combinação de fatores ESG, né, que a gente vem construindo ao longo do tempo. No ano passado, nós emitimos a debênture verde, né, que aí acho que vem a experiência que está listada na B3, né, carimbada lá como debênture verde. E até na emissão, na origem da emissão, você vê como as coisas são, né? Nós, com todo esse arcabouço, né, a gente não tinha a intenção de emitir uma debênture verde. Até quando fomos fazer o a demanda veio para um investidor, né, que nos disse, olha, por que vocês não fazem debênture verde, claro que vocês têm todas as características aqui, tem todas as condições. E aí foi quando nós fizemos a caracterização do papel como debênture verde, né, e foi muito, para nós foi simples, porque temos toda a transparência, todos os números auditados, né, os relatórios de sustentabilidade, eles são auditados, né, então vários indicadores de consumo de água, de consumo de energia, enfim, os vários sociais, todos eles com histórico para poder demonstrar, e o uso dos recursos, que é para uma atividade de reciclagem, né, e de produção com base em matéria-prima renovável. Mas o que eu queria destacar aqui, eu acho que tem um aprendizado de lá para cá muito legal, que foi o que aconteceu na pandemia, né? Se fala muito do digital, né? Que o digital andou bem na pandemia e tem reforçado seu posicionamento, né, com uma tendência, mas o nosso negócio também foi, né? Se for ver a performance econômica do nosso negócio no segundo trimestre, ele foi muito boa. Muito em função de que as pessoas começaram a demandar mais sobre embalagem de papel, né? As nossas embalagens são usadas em alimentos, são usadas nos setores que acabaram demandando mais durante a pandemia, e o papel foi utilizado como forma de embalagem desse modelo de consumo durante a pandemia. Isso fez com que, no final das contas, a pandemia foi uma prova de fogo, né? Eu acho que nós tivemos esse teste e a performance da companhia foi boa, e quem comprou a debênture, os investidores que compraram a debênture lá atrás, debênture verde, tiveram o benefício de ter melhorar o rating de crédito da companhia e ver o papel performar melhor e capturar benefício econômico depois da emissão. Não foi só na colocação do papel, né? E eu reputo isso muito a posicionamento socioambiental da companhia e mesmo do setor, né, que acaba se provando com menor risco, que no final do dia se acaba sendo o menor risco uma menor taxa de risco, né? Então um retorno maior para quem investiu no papel. Enfim, eu também teria aqui bastante coisa para comentar, né, mas da experiência, mas eu acho que para deixar assim um pouquinho do que eu vejo, né, acho que o momento foi muito, o ano 2020 está sendo um ano de prova para os negócios que se posicionem, que tem no DNA essa questão socioambiental, né? E uma coisa que só para concluir, eu acho que tudo é uma jornada, né? Para nós que estamos nas empresas, a gente aprende muito, né? Não tem, assim, às vezes eu vejo muita empresa sendo cobrada, né? Tem muito ativismo em ESG hoje no mercado, que eu acho que é legal para pressionar, né? Agora, as empresas também estão numa jornada de aprendizado e estão numa jornada de melhoria. Eu acho que essa é uma continuidade que ao longo do tempo nós vamos ter, e que as empresas vão se adaptando e vão dando cada vez mais atenção e respostas a uma sociedade, aos investidores que pedem esse tipo de compromisso, né?
Muito obrigado, Odimar. Eu acho que você colocou o tema de forma muito precisa e, de fato, a motivação, um pouco a chamada à ação desse painel aqui, essa chamada da parte da sociedade. Olha, temos muitas perguntas e pouco tempo, então eu acho que vamos fazer uma pergunta. Para aqueles que fizeram perguntas por escrito, vamos tentar organizar ex post uma resposta da parte aos quais foram dirigidas essas perguntas. Então, eu gostaria de fazer uma rodada última, muito breve, e fazer a resposta de forma sucinta, mas, aliás, além disso, as considerações finais, cada um, porque realmente estamos ficando sem tempo. Então, para a Juca, a pergunta para os três, a mesma pergunta: o que acham, assim, machetes, que a gente deve fazer, o que o Brasil tem que fazer, que faz falta, para que o Brasil dê um salto no mercado de títulos temáticos? Acho que todo mundo compartilha a ideia que é uma fonte muito promissora para destinar financiamento para a lacuna de infraestrutura. O que faz falta? O que faz falta? Então, Juca, a palavra com você.
Ok, obrigado, Morgan, pela questão. Eu acho que esse salto ele já está acontecendo, né? A gente já percebe ele acontecendo, tanto do lado dos reguladores quanto dos participantes, a própria B3, né? Fazendo parte desse salto, né? Do lado dos investidores, eles estão buscando diversificação. A gente está até também em função da pandemia, um cenário de juros baixos tem incentivado os investidores a buscarem diversificação de investimentos, e aí o próprio impacto da pandemia em si, né, o impacto social que ela gerou, combinado com alguns desastres naturais que infelizmente a gente acaba presenciando, tem chamado a atenção, né? E aí outros investidores, né, por exemplo, a carta do Larry Fink, né, o CEO da BlackRock, que por sinal é a gestora de um ETF nosso também, do ICO2, né? Eles têm movido as empresas, enquanto investidas, a tomarem posicionamento. É uma pauta relevante dentro do Fórum Econômico Mundial de Davos, né? E a gente sabe que isso é pauta e é importante, né? E aí também acho que o próprio Divan comentou, né? Da pressão que a sociedade faz em relação às empresas, né? Quanto maior as suas empresas, você tem responsabilidade, além da responsabilidade direta com o acionista, do ponto de vista de retorno e tudo mais, mas as empresas estão sendo cada vez mais cobradas de responsabilidades no segmento tanto social quanto sustentabilidade, governança. Isso é uma pauta que está muito forte, muito presente, né? Então, eu acho que essa é a construção. Acho que a gente está fazendo aqui junto com o CVM, Banco Central, FEBRABAN, o próprio BID, né, e tantos outros atores. A gente entende que a pressão ela já está acontecendo, e a gente também tem que estimular, né? A gente estimular isso de todos os meios possíveis, a B3 colocar isso na agenda, falando muito disso. Quanto mais a gente puder falar e dar visibilidade, fazer as empresas conversarem entre si, a gente acelera essa pauta. Assim que é a visão aqui da B3.
Ótimo, muito obrigado. Então, passo então a palavra para o Vasco, por favor. Pode dar um pouco a visão da parte do CVM, por favor.
Obrigado. Quando temos um objetivo, nós sempre olhamos para onde gostaríamos de estar, né? Mas a gente tem que pensar também onde estávamos. E eu não posso deixar de mencionar, concordo com o Juca que estamos avançando, e a gente não pode deixar de mencionar aqui nessa conclusão o trabalho enorme, não da CVM, mas das 200 entidades que estão no Laboratório de Inovação Financeira, essa ideia visionária que o BID trouxe à CVM há 3 anos atrás, né? Quem imaginaria que 3 anos depois nós teremos quase 600 pessoas trabalhando em diferentes temas, discutindo taxonomia e fazendo uma semana do investidor com dezenas de eventos tratando dessa temática. Então, acho que esse papel de mudança de cultura, de mindset, eu registro aqui um agradecimento a todos os participantes. Alguns estão aqui, como a B3, grande apoiador em vários temas, e ao BID, por ter sido aí o construtor desse trabalho que hoje se materializa numa parceria formal. Daqui para frente, vamos ter várias ações regulatórias, a CVM, e essas ações regulatórias serão também certamente cada vez mais alinhadas com os demais reguladores. É necessário uma concertação no país para que a gente tenha uma resposta que seja ao mesmo tempo efetiva, mas concertada, equilibrada entre os diferentes mercados. Então, o próprio Lab já tinha isso, né, quando trouxe para lá a Previc, a SUSEP, os ministérios, para que a gente debata esse tema. E certamente a nossa atuação regulatória, como já foi antecipado, vai tratar disso, mas sem abrir mão daquela preocupação com os custos de observância, com a eficiência e de propor coisas que façam sentido. A regulação não vai resolver tudo. E o passo seguinte, à medida que a regulação for mexendo, será certamente a supervisão. enfim, esse papel aí da CVM como supervisor, muito moldado pelo que a regulação vai colocar como obrigação ou com melhores práticas, ele é fundamental para garantir essa credibilidade. Então, eu vejo nos passos seguintes não só esse encaminhamento, mas uma expansão das ações em coordenação com reguladores, ministérios, inclusive na região. Nós temos um papel importante na América Latina, é um dos mercados mais importantes e temos aí uma oportunidade única de exercer essa vocação com plena capacidade e sucesso. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado, Vasco. Concordo 100%, totalmente com o que o senhor colocou aí com relação à oportunidade e à necessidade de passo certos, um tras outro, para a construção coletiva desse mercado aí. O Divan, pode compartilhar da sua experiência já emitendo o que falta para deslanche ainda mais vigorosa desse mercado?
Olha, Morgan, eu diria o seguinte, ó, nós estamos numa velocidade boa, tá? Eu acho que a gente está numa jornada. Eu tenho percebido assim o quanto este tema está sendo discutido em vários fóruns, né? O quanto tem surgido dúvidas, tem surgido, né? Tem casos que estão acontecendo e que são usados como exemplo para debate, né? O que fazer, o que está certo, o que está errado. Então, eu diria o seguinte, que nós estamos num momento aqui no Brasil muito, muito positivo desse tema ESG, numa aceleração da jornada. Né? Eu diria o seguinte, eu acho que tem que ter essa questão da regulação, né? Organizar para evitar os exageros. Sempre quando tem uma onda muito grande, né? Vem os exageros juntos. Né? Eu acho que aí o Vasco falou bem sobre isso, né? Ele tem uma regulação para controlar isso, né? Porque eu entendo que nós estamos no início de uma jornada, uma onda muito forte desse tema. Setores que não emitiram ainda, que não se beneficiaram disso, como foi mencionado durante os painéis anteriores, acho que vão emitir logo, vai ter uma demanda muito grande, na minha visão. Então, eu diria que a gente está num momento muito positivo. Acho que o cuidado que ficaria é que a regulação não fosse demasiada, né? Não fosse, a gente tem que deixar o mercado, tem que deixar as coisas acontecer e tentar cercar os excessos, né? Mas, e aí acho que tem um ponto de ajuste que os reguladores, né, vão com certeza buscar para poder estimular o mercado. Eu acho que é isso, né? Eu acho que a gente o Brasil, né? Ele tem vocação ambiental, né? Então acho que o Brasil ele tende a se beneficiar no mercado internacional desse tema, porque o Brasil ele tem essa vocação ambiental. Eu acho que o Brasil está se habilitando para isso cada vez mais. Então eu vejo muito positivo assim tudo que está acontecendo e eu acho que não. Eu acho que tá essa velocidade, essa aceleração tá muito grande agora no momento aqui no país. Obrigado pelo convite aí por participar desse painel.
Não, obrigado, senhor. É super interessante ter a visão de alguém que já emitiu, né? Que já está assim na arena dos feitos, não? Das emissões feitas. Então, eu acho que vocês tenho aqui uma lista de perguntas. Vou fazer uma só primeiro peço para Maria contestar, porque foi de fato dirigido para ela. Depois, de pronto, se a gente tem tempo, peço para o Vasco também complementar. A pergunta vai com um setor específico, que é como enxerga a possibilidade de ampliar o uso de títulos verdes para aprovação, após a aprovação do novo marco legal brasileiro para saneamento, água e saneamento, né? E a apertura para privatizações. Você acha que isso é de fato uma oportunidade grande? Pode contestar essa pergunta, Maria, por favor?
Com muito prazer, Morgan. Como já disse na apresentação, sim, acho que é um potencial tremendo. O Ministério do Desenvolvimento Regional, a gente tem a sorte de ter a liderança deles no nosso Laboratório de Inovação Financeira, justamente o Grupo de Finanças Verdes, tem um subgrupo só de água e saneamento, né? Eles, recentemente, justamente já só com essas reformas regulatórias, já captaram, com investimentos privados, alguma coisa como 3, 4 bilhões de reais em água e saneamento. Houveram 18 debêntures nesse setor infelizmente, não todas e não ainda aproveitando do mercado de títulos verdes e sustentáveis. Tá? A gente vê um enorme potencial, porque vai haver um crescimento do uso do mercado de capitais para captar. Existem instrumentos que a gente está discutindo justamente dentro do Lab para poder até incentivar mais desse tipo de debêntures, mas eu acho que um pouco, voltando até ao painel que a gente teve aí também, até na parte internacional, a responsabilidade desses investimentos mostrarem que tem um impacto ambiental em termos de melhor tratamento de água, redução de gás de efeito estufa, uso eficiente de energia, infraestruturas resilientes. A gente tem obrigação de promover, sobretudo quando a gente diz que está trazendo o setor privado para aumentar a eficiência das infraestruturas, a gente tem obrigação de promover que essas infraestruturas sejam sustentáveis. Por outro lado, a gente também tem a obrigação de poder acompanhar e ajudar esses emissores a poderem mostrar, de repente, o que já estão fazendo. Né? Água e saneamento também, além da parte ambiental, tem impacto social tremendo. Né? A gente sabe que a maioria dos projetos que financiam água e saneamento resultam em melhor qualidade de vida nas populações em volta, trabalho para catadores, economia circular, tem um impacto enorme social também, que muitas vezes não é valorizado. Então, eu acredito que sim, é uma área onde já está crescendo o mercado, já se está captando muito mais investimento privado, a reforma regulatória teve um impacto importante, e acho que aí é onde a gente está podendo ajudar a BID, né, toda a equipe aqui da CVM, B3, pensar um pouco como é que a gente pode ajudar agora esse mercado que está saindo adiante a poder captar melhor e demonstrar melhor esse impacto em sustentabilidade. Obrigado, Mauro.
Não, obrigado a você, Maria. Eu só acrescentaria que esse é um mercado, esse é um setor no qual o BID temos uma grande atuação, uma carteira de mais de $1 bilhão em execução, e onde a gente enxerga também que estamos muito preparados para ajudar tanto a estruturação dos projetos, para lembrar o que tinha colocado aí o Anthony no painel anterior, quanto a colaborar na missão. Então, é de fato uma oportunidade enorme por causa da nova lei. Acho que acabou o nosso tempo, então eu gostaria...
I think our time is up, so I'd like to thank you. And please follow me in recognizing the leadership that Juca represents in B3 in terms of creating long-term value for the investors and for those active in those markets. There's real commitment to promote and create the market development. Vasco as well, in his role as a regulator, recognizing the need, creating awareness, standards, following the monitoring what is happening, and helping development, as Odivan mentioned too. And I'd also like to recognize his action in the market, creating bonds, issuing bonds. I think this was a very good panel that gave us a lot of encouragement. So I'd like to thank you for your leadership in your own areas. And I'd like to reiterate a message that Maria has already mentioned. We are available to work together to follow the work that is being done jointly. This is a fantastic opportunity for Brazil, and we are very proud to be your partners in this agenda. Thank you very much for participating, and thank you for coming here and participating in this seminar, and we will try to answer all the questions that were asked. Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Boa tarde.